This is The Convergence.
Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Convergence, where every week we talk about Web 3.0 and its convergence with sustainability, with government, with all of the different marketplaces that are out there. I'm so excited to have a guest, a brand new friend of mine that I just recently met, Kyle Kemper. And Kyle and I actually have a connection with an old friend of mine, Joseph Funke. And we both happened to attend a virtual birthday party for Joseph just the other night. So this is my third time seeing you on Zoom in like 72 hours.
Indeed. Yeah. Super stoked to be here, Derrick. This is going to be great.
Well, great. Well, welcome. Tell me a little, now you're in Florida, but you're originally a Canadian, right?
I am originally a Canadian, and today's Canada Day. So, a piece of my heart is up there right now, but here I am down in Florida and, loving every minute of it and really excited for an Independence Day weekend too. This is going to be great.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about Raise first. I want to talk about your books as well, because many people know Michael Moyo's been on this show a couple of times. I'm actively involved in Michael Moyo's movement in New York around DAOs, and I know you've written some book on governing with DAOs. But let's first talk about Raise, because you're the chief alchemist at Raise, and Raise is essentially a token platform for raising capital for early stage companies. Is that a good?
Yeah,
summary?
exactly. So having worked in the startup and entrepreneurial and also finance space for a long time now, I've had a lot of different option agreements that just were papers, were contracts that just kind of disappeared into the ether. And you put a lot of effort in with a group for a little bit of time. You may not stay with them like in the long term, but there's really nothing that catalyzes your position within that group and rewards that effort. Maybe I'm often most valuable at the beginning of projects in helping put together the strategy, etc. But just recognize that there's a challenge around that. And one of the things about blockchain and cryptocurrencies has been like this idea around tokenizing equities and tokenizing securities. And we've seen a lot of the security token platforms that are effectively looking at like securities from a cryptocurrency balance point of view, where you'd have this many of the shares, but they're not really solving like the digital stock certificate, if you will. So I think NFT, and with Raise, what we're doing is we're creating digital dynamic security tokens and membership tokens that are they're like NFTs, and within them they contain your position, your equity, your your contracts, all within these kind of dynamic NFTs. But more than that as well, they can enable seamless payouts and revenue share and royalties and profit distributions and dividends by utilizing digital programmable money. So, with Raise, for example, we're raising capital using our own platform, which is ready and live right now. And we're taking 10% of our gross revenue in perpetuity and tokenizing it into 400 tokens. And each token represents 0.025% of gross revenue on the platform. Right now, we're in the first round, and it's 1 ETH per token. It's a private sale also. This is not a public sale. It's not an open offering. It's a private sale that you need to be invited to, and that's the way the entire platform is going to work going forward. We're not a crowdfunding platform. We're not a public offering platform. We're a private software solution that enables private companies to issue their own securities in the form of dynamic tokens. And with what we're doing is, I personally believe that equity is a little bit overrated, and that by tokenizing revenue streams, you can actually have a much accelerated path towards earning some revenue out of them, as well as creating incentive for your investors and your community and your team to really focus on driving revenue. And in addition to this, as you tokenize it, and by creating a private secondary marketplace for it, you can actually achieve liquidity for the project if there's interest from more investors, and yet you've sold out your token round. So, creating a private secondary market, and a private secondary market that also, can benefit the project by, we're charging a 5% fee, 2.5% is going to raise, and 2.5% is going to go back to the project. So, in addition to just the strictly issuing of the tokens, it's also a platform for investor and community engagement through these dynamic NFTs and these dynamic tokens. So you can add investor calls directly to your calendar in one click, add your payout address, set your sell price, and then access a whole investor or an advisor toolbox that has all the relevant links to let you, as a member of the community and a stakeholder within the community, of what are some actions that you can take that help support the growth of the organization. So this is kind of where we are. It's a really fast project that, we're 2 months in. The private sale is going. We have an equity option as well. And our next phase is to actually tokenize the whole share structure.
It makes so much sense. And having been around startups and investing, for the last 20 years, I have so many Carta logins for so many different things, and none of them truly, they tell me what my stake is, but every time that company raises more money, well, I get diluted, right? Or my options, what was the price of the last round versus this round? So I've always got to do the mental gymnastics of trying to figure out what, if anything, is worth anything. So I love this side. And then also it's like, well, okay, I'm an equity holder, but they have profit, but they're not distributing that. Well, why, right? Well, we need it to reinvest in the company. Okay, great. Well, at what point will we be receiving dividend checks? So there's all this conversation that has to go on. And then there's this constant, I think the challenge as you get larger, you get to 500 or 1,000 shareholders, then you have things like people pass away. And now you get an estate attorney contacting you and saying, we need to transfer these into a trust. And it's like, well, how much do they really have? We're in the middle of a round. How much did we raise so far? What's the dilution? It's really a difficult and there's reason that there's lots of attorneys that make $550 an hour to advise you on what this is going to look like. It's not really the best approach, though.
It certainly is. It was the approach, and it was the
only approach.
It was the best way to get to where we are now. And now there's a new model, and we're building this new model. We believe we're a first to issue this. And that point of secession is fantastic. That's something that can dynamically be programmed into it too. In case something happened to you, is if you don't log in for X amount of time, perhaps it's like a dead man switch kind of idea, just automatically transfer. And that applies to the whole kind of crypto wallet. And I think we'll see, self-custody wallets implement some sort of feature like that in the near term. But back to the gross revenue, yes, if instantly as money comes into the project, a piece of it is just apportioned right away, to a distribution fund, then how the company spends its money. They'll have the 90% to spend, to operate, to continue to do growth. But that 10% comes right off the top. And then you don't actually have to worry, because when you're dealing with profits, then there's a lot of tricks that can come into play. And
that's right. Oh yes, there are.
And you don't, and as especially as public investors, you're really, it's you're really getting the short end of it. And then as well as the revenues start picking up too, and as your company, if you see that things are tracking really well, it's well within your right to go and buy back stock, go and buy back, your revenue shares if you really want that. And if perhaps, we were chatting with an investor yesterday who's like, well, what if the company really needs that 10%? And it's like life or death for the company. Well, then you pass a governance, vote to the people. Maybe we move this down to 5% for a time, but it's you need to engage with the shareholders at some point around those types of discussions. But probably if you're in that stage, the tokens probably won't be worth that much. In any case.
No, but I love that idea too, because I think there's also liquidity, right? I invest in both public and private companies. And one of the challenges always with private companies is I have no idea when or if I will ever see that money come back. So I do like to go into pre-IPO kind of stuff, right? Because I know that I might have a lockup period. I might have a lockup of a year, but I could trade my position in the company for cash. I can exchange it for other shares. I mean, I can go through all those things that I just can't do on a private company. And I think it does provide liquidity to investors, what you're talking about doing. It also provides transparency, governance. To your point about the 10%, if the company really needs it, well, okay, then what additional equity or token position do we obtain by allowing that 10% to come back in the company instead of you just taking it from us? Because that always feels
convert.
It never feels good whenever they're like, hey, we have $500,000 in profits we were going to distribute, but can we buy this machine instead? And you don't want to be the jerk that's like, no, I can't. I don't want to move the company forward. But you also don't want to be the first one that says, what am I getting for this? I'm giving up money that's due to me. Should I not be receiving some additional, consideration?
And from the corporate point of view and from the company point of view, if you set from the very beginning that this is our intention, then it shouldn't come as a surprise. I was talking to someone the other day that was planning on charging like a 10% fee for the business that they were doing. And I was like, you could charge 8%, right? It's like, yep. Like you could charge 12%, right? Like, yeah. So what the heck does it matter if you say we're going to take 1% of or 10% of gross revenue? That's the difference between 10% and 9%. So it's as if you're taking 9, but you've created out of that 1% of your revenue stream, like you've now opened up capital and community. And this is also a way to like, in addition to equity, because again, it's like equity, when will this result in something? They say I
have a whole drawer full behind me of equity agreements of shares that I own in startups that haven't been around in 15 years.
The old adage is salaries are for expenses and equities for wealth. Well, okay, but I don't necessarily agree with that. And I think, as if you can be investing, in these revenue shares and you have a digital token that's there, and more than just the rights on, it's also a portal for you to engage. And because you've created these dynamic structures, if it's a peer-to-peer, if it's a a B2C or a B2B, for investors, you can also provide referral links. Like, referrals is a huge industry. So, if you can make it a really easy way to be an evangelist and also profit off being evangelist by, embedding these coded structures in. So this is why I'm like so jazzed on this. And we have a whole bunch of incredible projects already like lining up. And I'm right now in the point where it's like, okay, I don't want to pick up the phone and try and get 100 projects right now, because I want to get 5 for like July and August, and like, let's test and battle test and iterate and improve, and then build up our scalable processes so that, yes, come September, October, November, we can be doing 100, ideally up to 500 plus companies a month come the new year. I mean, that might be a little bit optimistic, but whatever, I want to go for it, because really, how many LLCs are registered in the States every year?
I don't know the number, but it's a lot, right? What is it?
Millions.
It's millions, right? Yeah.
Like millions. So that's, and every single one of those represents a potential raise project or a client. And we're also really open because, like, from our perspective, yes, we would love for them all to be coming through this, but as well, like, with other investors and accelerators, like, we're really open to like white labeling this tech in a fashion so that, this fundamental infrastructure can help power, this new wave. And obviously there's going to be continued iteration as we get into the next point about, full Web 3, because this isn't full Web 3. This is like Web 5. This is Web 2 plus Web 3. Yeah, so Web 5.
I like that a lot. What I particularly like, I think the timing is very, very good in the sense that I noticed maybe 2 months ago, there was one particularly day I noticed that the conversation that I was having with CEOs that I consult for, as well as all the articles I was seeing on LinkedIn, is there was this sort of radical shift in the conversation from revenue to margin. And it almost happened overnight. And this is usually an indicator when you see these kind of conversations changing. That's usually an indicator that recession is here, because it's in, CEOs, investors are starting to look at things and saying, I'm not going to fund Twitter for 10 years at a massive loss every year. I want to know when and how we're going to make money. And something I've always been a proponent for, but have never been successful in achieving, is trying to convince startups to bake margin into the price. So instead of always being at a loss, you could still have a loss on the balance sheet, but let's take 10% of revenue and let's just call that distribution right out of the gate, right? So that investors are seeing something coming back. And the truth of the matter is, I'm good early on because I'm great at connecting people. When I do my most of connecting is right after I make the investment, because I sort of forget about it. It sort of becomes part of the portfolio. But even if that's a $75 distribution that goes into my account, and I see that and I go, oh, you know what? I was just having a conversation the other day. It sort of reminds me that I'm paid staff. I used to tell companies this all the time. One of the smartest things you can ever do is to get an advisory board and pay them. I don't care if it's $200 a month, and don't Venmo them or wire it. Cut them a physical check, because that rich person, that connected person goes to the mailbox, gets that check, and they go, oh, I got to run this over to the bank. Well, in the 10 minutes, they're thinking about my business. They're thinking about, so I just bought time and I've bought power and energy towards my company. So that's what I love about this. You could bake that in from the beginning. You could just say, hey, every dollar that comes in, 10 cents goes over to here, 5 cents goes to these investors, 3 cents goes to these. It's amazing. It's a great accounting tool.
Indeed. And and this, I would say this was inspired as well by juicebox.money, which is one of the turnkey DAO platforms that does exactly this. So they have transparent payout schedules for they'll have a treasury, and then on a monthly cycle, these are where all their payments go to. And it's the full Web3 model. It's really impressive. And I love them and support them and learn from them. But with Raise, it's just a different approach. The rest of the world isn't ready for full Web3 quite yet, and just an email login, and also crypto payments is definitely something we really want to push, because you just can't do seamless distributions using Swift or ACH without a transfer agent. And we don't want to have a transfer agent. Don't want to have a broker dealer license. We're a software service, and enabling companies to handle their own distribution. But again, we'll provide the software, the tools that enable this, and we'll charge our fees on this as well. And so and get this, Derrick. So in addition to just the security tokens, though, come the membership tokens. So the membership tokens are the utility tokens. And we have so much in these dynamic security tokens in terms of the interaction of them. And they can have if-then equations. If you have the membership token, then you're going to get, these airdrop tokens, exclusive access, exclusive content, a discount, etc. And so these membership tokens, and you can sell them, and you can sell them for fiat to the public. And we have a Shopify integration, so anyone can just sell using Shopify and actually deliver these dynamic NFTs, to their participants. And then the sales of those NFTs represents revenue that will feed the investors as well. So it's a really nice kind of circle, and it gets me really excited. And on top of the platform, if you want to do a 10,000 PFP or one of those kind of select things, you can do that. We've got all the tech for that. Fortunately, we're built on top of a really robust platform called Block.
So I want to talk with you for a few moments about Evergreen Carbon Credits, one of the sponsors of this show. I started working with Evergreen when I was telling a friend of mine who's involved with that company about my efforts to try to learn more about blockchain, NFTs, crypto, all the things in this space. And he showed me Evergreen. Evergreen was a really unique solution. I've looked at carbon credits in the past. I've been in the sustainability industry for almost 15 years. I understood what they were. You were buying an offset to offset the carbon footprint that you or your company has. But I also understood the challenges with that. They're sold in very, very large blocks, and then people break those blocks up and try to sell individual credits or small clusters of credits to businesses. And that creates some room for fraud, for people to not be up and up on what that project is, if that carbon credit is real. And there's challenges with that. And you can Google it right now and find there's a big case in Europe going on about fraudulent carbon credits. But what Evergreen did, I thought, was really unique. They took this idea of NFTs and they took blocks of carbon credits and broke those things down into tens of thousands or even millions of individual carbon credits. They can actually fraction those even out to a tenth of a carbon credit if they needed to. And they were able to then create a smart contract around that carbon credit so that you can track it back to its origin. You can find out what project it was associated with, but you are also guaranteed that the carbon credits you're getting from Evergreen are the real deal. You get that certificate, you get that certification that only the blockchain can do. So that's why it made sense for them to come on as a sponsor of this show. We're talking about all this new technology, and with new technology comes higher energy usages in some senses. And Evergreen is here to help offset that. If you want to look to maybe improve your image in the marketplace, maybe you're looking to offset some of your carbon footprint, not even just for your image, but actually for the sake of the planet, head on over to evergreencarboncredits.com and check out what they do. You can buy credits for as little as $11, and you'll get the certificate and the NFT that you can put in your wallet that shows that you've actually made that contribution. And that money, particularly right now with the projects they're working on, is going to reforestation in the Amazon. I think that's something we can all really get behind, particularly when we understand that the environment, the climate we're all connected to it. It doesn't matter if we're putting off emissions here in the US or if it's happening in Mexico. It all contributes to the same global problem. So why not be part of a global solution with Evergreen Carbon Credits? I think the membership thing is really important too to think about when you're talking about blockchain, because a great example of this, I'm going to show you guys my screen here in a second. Justin Pierce, who's been on the show, I collect his physical art, and I bought a number of his NFTs out of his collection that he launched a few months back. And as part of being in the first series, he did a new drop yesterday. And immediately when the new drop came in, I got 11 new NFTs out of the new series as a right of a first series holder. Now everybody's out today paying 1/10 of an ETH for these, and I got them for free because I was an early supporter of what he does. And now it's interesting, they haven't done the reveals yet, so they just sort of put a little chicken leg in here, but I can see my numbers, I can see all of the code that goes along with that. And I know that when reveal comes, I think reveal comes at 3:00 today, I can log in and I can see all the new NFTs that I got. But isn't that a cool thing to actually say as an artist, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but if you support me from here on, you'll get a piece of the action from here on every time I have a sale. Now, I have to decide tonight. I technically could go on to OpenSea tonight, sell that collection, and likely recover all of the money that I invested in the NFTs and still hold the originals and still hold the rights in the first, those benefits for that membership. So I think that's one of the things people aren't thinking about just yet. They're not thinking about how do you create community with tokens. Maybe in the last 5 minutes or so here, chat a little bit about creating community with tokens. This
is a great example you just did there about the early supporters get benefits as it grows along. We're looking at we've got a really awesome movie. I'm not gonna spoil the subject, but it's
you'll have to come back for that.
It's answering it's positing an answer to one of the greatest questions of the industry, and it's a full-blown movie around it. And we're exploring, what if we in advance say we're going to, it's 120 movies, so let's say we want to make 7,200 1-second clips because of that. And just like that, you could buy in advance that unrevealed item, and then for $50 or something that will help fund the movie. And then once it gets released, then it becomes unveiled. And in addition to that, there can be discounts on merch, exclusive access to content behind the scenes. The movie industry is just a phenomenal one.
Well, Kyle, I'm so glad you brought this up. Many people know from this show, and probably from I started and produced a TV show called Riding Fat, PHAT, that is in distribution through Sony Entertainment, Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's currently on the Crackle platform. But my producer from that is a documentary film. She's the president of the National Documentary Film Foundation. And one of the biggest challenges is funding documentary films because they are very, very niche. Her and I have two projects right now. One is It's very religious. So it's like, it's a cool story. I mean, it's a great story, but how do you fund it? Is anybody going to write the $250,000 or $500,000 check to produce that? No, but would 1,000 people write a $25,000 or $25 check? Yeah, probably. Would 10,000 people write a 25? Sure, they would. But what do they get? Am I making them an equity holder? It's like, no, I don't want to do that. But if I gave them a frame from the movie, right, there was something that turned into an NFT at the end,
and more than just a frame too. And you made them have a sense of of belonging and participation and a shared sense of ownership in it. That's exactly like the triangle that Joseph always talks about. Like you can achieve that, through that. And then for those who do have the wherewithal to write that check too, like then you have the investor tokens for the films as well. And instead of complicated waterfall agreements that are commonplace within the film industry, you have it all broken out digitally with instant settlement on revenue events, and you get to revenue way sooner because of the membership tokens. So it's a really it's like that's just one issue that gets me.
You've got my head swimming on that because, for instance, that show right now, my understanding is they've got an offer to do international distribution, but they have to convert the original digital file into another format, and there's a cost there. So there'll be a benefit, but there's a cost. So who picks up the cost? Well, in that instance, if that was a crowdfunded project through tokens, you could literally go out to the token holders and say, hey, here's this new opportunity that's going to create new revenue, but we need this amount of funds to do that. Would you be willing to buy an additional token for international distribution that has different rights to it? So you're blowing my mind here because now all of a sudden I got to call Kelly and I'm like, hey, I got an idea.
And you also like put out a bounty too. Like, hey, if someone can do this, like, because sometimes you put challenges out, like what might seem like a really complicated thing for one person, for another person, it's like, dude, that's so easy. Like I could just crush that. I could do that this afternoon.
Well, no, exactly. And I think, even going back to the NFT collection I was showing off there just a minute ago, I think one of the other things that's fascinating is one of the things that Justin did with this new collection for those who held is, I think it's 3 random numbers they drew, but when that NFT opens up, 3 random ones have an ETH tied to it. So if you're a holder, now all of a sudden you just got $1,000 put in your account. It's like, whoa, what happened?
Full on gambling. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, but if you're a member, the only people that get that opportunity fall into that. So it's just such a powerful tool. It's such a way to automate legal contracts. Just 2 weeks ago, I had the guy from Lawonomics on the show, Nima. And, he's talking about how the legal field is about ready to radically change. And there's going to be the old school attorneys that are just not going to get it. So right now is the time, as somebody in the legal industry, start embracing blockchain, because there still has to be people that write the contracts. There still has to be the person that sets it up in the beginning. Yes, a lot of this stuff is automated, but you got to write the rules, and you have to have that attorney that writes those sort of rules and gets those things in place, particularly when it comes to securities. You want to make sure that you have your T's crossed and your I's dotted. So, hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in to The Convergence, where every week we talk about Web 3.0 and its convergence with sustainability. And we ask the question, how can Web 3.0 save the world? And I think Kyle's just told us how it can save maybe a lot of startups and a lot of cap table frustration. So we'll make a part 2 of this as well, because I think it's important. I really want to talk about his most recent book, talking about DAOs. If you've listened to the Michael Moyo episodes, you'll understand how Michael believes this is both a political and a corporate governance opportunity with DAOs. And we're going to ask Kyle a lot of questions about that in this next episode. So until next time.
Thanks for listening to The Convergence. If you want more information about the topics you've heard here today, reach out to us at theconvergencepodcast.com.